the big, beautiful bill got approved in the Senate.
So this is what we know is officially in this version of the bill. But one thing's for certain, it adds $5 trillion to the debt limit. No tax on tips. That's something that Trump campaigned on. No tax on overtime.
Can we pause for a second? No tax on tips and especially no tax on overtime is dope.
Yes. I would have liked it if it didn't cut Medicaid and SNAP to pay for it, but yes, it is dope. This is my...
Now, when you say that it cut SNAP and Medicaid, doesn't it just put requirements? Like you have to work 80 hours a month or something like that to...
They increase the amount. So people already have to work to qualify for benefits. They just increase the amount of hours.
To 80.
To 80.
I do 80 by Thursday.
Yeah, Tom, but you're also not 65 and on your 30th decade of... working and on disability.
Yeah, but do you really want to... Hold on. Whoa. You're picking like a really fringe person. If you've got disability, it's a different story. But I'm saying, and I think they even have called out, if you are able-bodied, then fill in blank.
Yeah. Able-bodied people, like if you're a 30-year-old who is...
You're 65.
I want to protect the 65-year-olds. My mom is 66. My dad's 80-something. But still, like, that isn't fair for them to then have to work more. Also,
when you say it's not fair for them, what do you mean?
That their fundamental requirement that they agreed to before, like it's almost like you're entering into a contract and then that contract is now changing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, be careful what you vote for. If you vote for something that you know will bankrupt the country and there is no way to continue to pay for that, you are in a weakened position. I will just tell everybody right now, guess what you're voting for? You are voting for having the rug pulled out from under you when you get older if you don't die violently. Like that's what you're voting for. Raising the debt ceiling by $5 trillion is saying, I don't care that we are going to bankrupt this country, which will be violent, which I think people lose sight of. At some point, it's a beautiful deleveraging. You're taking some of the things that I rail against all the time, and you're saying, yeah, some of the wealth has to be redistributed. I got it. You're going to have to print some money. Yep, I understand. But you also have to do some austerity measures. There is just a hard reality to be faced about where we are at as a country. Money has physics. And while I get it, I don't love it either. And look, my mom, for reasons having to do with meaning and purpose, my mom, because of me, who clearly did not need to work, kept working well into her 70s. So it's like, to some extent, work ethic is just a thing, finding meaning, purpose in your job, and culturally not convincing everybody that work is for suckers. We got to get people back on track from a cultural perspective about hard work is amazing, and finding something that you can do well into your 70s to continue to contribute to society is going to become critically important. And so from where I'm sitting, just looking at the math, expecting people to be able to retire in their 60s just isn't going to keep being a thing. It's just not. I don't want to bamboozle somebody. So if they thought they were going to be able to retire at 65, like, okay, let's try to figure out a way where we're pushing it back for people that aren't like right at the finish line. But even if we got to push it for people right at the finish line, we got to do what we got to do. This is a math equation.
And they're already doing that. For example, like Social Security is a sliding scale. So my mom specifically, I know if she would have retired at 65, she would have got like $1,000 a month. If you retire at 67, it goes up to like $1,700 a month. And then if you retire at 70, it goes up to like $2,300 a month. So they're already incentivizing you to stay in the workforce longer. Whether it comes down to Social Security, I already know that it's a scam and it's not available for my generation. So that's not my hill to die on. There's two ways to make money, right, to pay for things. You can cut stuff or you can increase spending. Those are the two ways to like make something happen. And I think in this specific bill, yes, no tax on overtime is dope. And yes, no tax on tips is dope. However, in order to pay for that, instead of saying we're going to cut the bloated place that fails an audit for 10 years, that hasn't once, the Pentagon has never came out and said, my bad guys, this is where all the money goes. We're going to give them more money. And this place over here where people are actually getting benefits, again, the old, the sick, the disabled, we're going to make it a little bit harder for you to get especially.
Yeah, okay, let me make a pitch. I don't know this is why Trump is doing this, but certainly you could map his behaviors to this and it would make complete sense. Trump is looking at the future and he realizes the likelihood that we end up in a kinetic war with China is way too high. And if you're not prepared for a kinetic war with China, you dramatically increase the likelihood that it happens. Us building something like an Iron Dome becomes increasingly important as more and more countries have the ability to launch things at you from distance. We're going to need EMP technology to make sure that drone swarms can't come over here and decimate things. You need to be able to protect yourself. Now, if this kind of spending were going on when we were still mired in Iraq or in Afghanistan, then I would have a much bigger beef with it. But while I definitely am nearly violently opposed to anything that increases the budget, spending on the military at this exact moment, yeah, I get that. Now, being able to pass an audit, that seems critically important to me. But America has already said we want no accountability. We are opposed, literally violently opposed. We will burn things to the ground if you try to hold government responsible, which is insane. And everyone who has that vibe should be quite literally ashamed of themselves. That's so crazy. That's so crazy. I cannot believe that people create a mental model that allows them to justify not, like, they want an aggressive IRS, like all up in everybody's business, and they don't want a similar function for the U.S. government.
And then next beef, maybe you can help me rationalize this. We're roughly adding $95 billion to support border enforcement. That's in new ICE agents. That's to complete the border wall, and that's to hire new actual agents. He has reduced border crossings from, let's call it open
infinite
to 99% closed, right? Yep. Why do we need $100 billion if we already have it 0%?
I'm guessing this is for him to go out and get the people that are already here and get them out. That's my assumption. Now, if there's been talk, I've literally heard nothing about what they plan to do with the money that they're increasing for border security. The next 10 years of America's life is going to be defined by two things: debt and values. You are going to be in a war for a cultural war, that is the right language, over what does it mean to be an American? What are the values that we're going to say we don't tolerate here? What are going to be the things that we allow? And so step number one is you've got to block off that, and then you've got to figure out what you're going to do with the people that are here, especially given the economic crisis that we're in. If you have people that are in the country illegally and they are drawing off of your services, which they are, you've got to have a plan for that. And so just like if you were running a household and you were having a hard time putting your kids through school and making ends meet, and every now and then you were asking your kids to skip a meal, and then in the basement you realize that you've got 6 neighbor kids, at some point you got to be like, what are we doing here? Neighbor kids need to be taken care of by their parents. Many Americans are going to have a stroke over that kind of thinking. That is where we are. We are not able to feed our kids at every meal. At some point you do go, the family is the right unit of analysis. And in this analogy, the country is the family. And you got to be like, hey, I hope all these people do well, but we just can't take care of everybody.